together. Well, welcome to our annual Kriya weekend. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be sharing on this topic this weekend. So tonight we want to talk about Kriya and harmony in life. I found a quote on Kriya Yoga that I want to read. This is from Yogananda. Practice Kriya night and day. It is the greatest key to salvation. Other people go by books and lesser practices, but it will take them incarnations to reach God. Kriya is not only, as I've often said, the airplane route to Him, but also the greatest way of destroying present temptation. When you feel that joy within, no evil will be able to touch you. To you, sense pleasures will then seem like stale cheese compared to the nectar of God's joy. Kriya Yoga is probably one of the greatest gifts that Yogananda brought us. I'm noticing the book on Daiva's desk there, the autobiography of a yogi, and I was remembering, preparing for my sharing this evening, the chapter in the autobiography of a yogi that's titled, I Go to America. And it's when Yogananda is in his home in India, and Priya, we went to that when we were on pilgrimage to India. There was this room downstairs, and it's where Yogananda has Babaji come and visit him. So it's a very momentous occasion. Read that chapter if you get a chance to. But all of a sudden, Babaji appears to Yogananda, and he says, yes, it is I, Babaji, and I am the one who is sending you to the West to share the teachings of Kriya Yoga. And Babaji says to Yogananda, I came to your guru, Sri Yukteswar, at the Kumbh Mela, and I told Sri Yukteswar that I was going to be sending you to him so that you could train Yogananda in preparation. And so it was a very moving, as you can imagine, Babaji, who doesn't appear very often, it was really fun. We just had a retreat at Laurelwood, a lovely retreat, and we had just finished our morning spiritual practices, and 2 or 3 of the women, as soon as the sadhana was over, they said, who is that woman over there? Who is that woman? And then I explained Babaji and just how this is probably, is this the only picture we have of Babaji? Maybe. There aren't many pictures of Babaji, and Babaji is very ethereal. So, and when Babaji, you never know when Babaji's going to appear. Babaji has appeared in our hallway right now. There he is. As you walk in, say a prayer up there. But as you can imagine, back to the story, Yogananda sees Babaji, and he starts to go towards him. And Babaji says, no, don't come. And then all of a sudden, Yogananda finds his feet, stuck to the ground. and he can't move. And then finally, when then Babaji dematerializes, right, then Yogananda finds he can move. Such a great story. Such a great story. If it wasn't for Yogananda, he said yes. He came to the West, and then the story, if you get a chance, reread that chapter. It's just one miracle after the other. He had no money, but somehow his father ended up giving him the money for the trip. There was no room on the ship, on and on. You know, when he stands up to speak, he realizes he needs to speak in English, and he doesn't know English, right? And then all of a sudden he ends up speaking, and afterwards it was like, you know, he spoke for like 45 minutes or an hour. Afterwards he asked the people, he said, what did I say? And they said, no, we were deeply moved by what you said. And so we're truly blessed to have these teachings of Kriya Yoga, that Yogananda brought these to us. But our topic this morning is a reminder that Kriya is not just a meditation technique, right? It's a way of life. It's a comprehensive spiritual path, right? It can help us to have more energy. It can help us to clear our mind. It can help us to overcome trials. Every week in the Festival of Light, we read, even a little practice of this inward religion will free one from dire fears and colossal sufferings. Right? What is the path of Kriya Yoga? There's 4 techniques. I thought we could just talk about them a little bit tonight. And when you think of these 4 techniques, think of a stool, right? There's 4 legs, okay? Each technique represents a leg. If you take a leg away, what happens to the stool? It gets a little wobbly. You can't really take a technique away. Each one is important, and each one brings its own attributes, its own benefits. So that's why we always talk, when we talk about the path of Kriya Yoga, it's fun when new people come and they say, I want to learn Kriya Yoga. And then so we'll sit down and we'll say, well, do you know the energization? Yes. Do you know Hong Sa? Yes. Well, then you're on the path of Kriya Yoga. So it's a wonderful reminder. But the first leg that we always talk about is energization. I have my shills here from class. Energization, why? When you think of it, when you go through life, right, it takes energy to live, doesn't it, right? So if you're going to go to work, are you just going to go to work? I'm going to go to work now, right? How are you going to go to work? You've got to get ready. You got to check your watch. You got to make your breakfast. You got to put your clothes on, right? If you're going to go play, if you're going to, I don't know, anything, make a meal, right? You've got to look at your clock. You've got to make sure you got your ingredients. You've got to have energy, right? So the same thing on the spiritual path. We need to have energy, right? And what do we learn in the energization? Using our will, right? Greater the will, the greater the flow of energy, absolutely. And then the greater the flow of joy. But using our will, we learn how to tense and relax the different body parts so we can draw in the cosmic energy, so we can draw in that divine energy. We learn that it's unlimited for us. And to be on this spiritual path, it takes energy, doesn't it? I thought once I came to the spiritual path, I have it made. God will come to me. Here I am, I'm ready. But it takes energy, right? We have to get up early at 5 o'clock and do our energization, even when it's raining outside. We have to, it takes a lot of energy. So here we are. The first thing we learn is the energization exercises. Okay? We learn that we can tune into that divine energy to use it not only in our spiritual practices, but in our everyday life. We can learn to, as the motto at Ananda is one of the many mottos, it's say yes to life. We can learn we can say yes to whatever comes in front of us, and we will have the energy to meet it, right? And then if we do it willingly, as Lorna reminded us of that, then we can do it with joy. What a gift that is to be reminded of that joy, right? So what's the second leg we learn? Hong Sa. This is a great book. Bharat wrote this, Joseph Cornell. It's Om, the Melody of Love. As you can see, all my little Post-it pads. When I finally get into a book, I really get into it. And he had he wrote something about Hong Sa that I wanted to read. He writes, while visualizations, affirmations, and many modern meditation and relaxation practices are extremely beneficial, the Hong Sa technique is unique in that it has the potential to take you to God. Yogananda said this technique is the greatest contribution of India's spiritual science to the world. It's quite a statement. And that 1 hour of Hong Sa practice equals 24 hours of sitting in the silence. One of the most sacred and ancient of all yoga practices, Hong Sa is one of the 4 main techniques that comprise the path of Kriya Yoga, which Yogananda brought to the West in 1920. Okay, what do we do in Hong Sa, right? We concentrate. Okay, we focus our energy up here at the point between the eyebrows. Okay, that concentration, we do that in the energization. And then now in Hong Sa, the second leg of our second technique of our path to Kriya Yoga. And then that practice, what happens? The more we do something, the more we do it. What is it? Practice makes perfect, or what's that other saying? The appetite grows by what it feeds upon. The more we're keeping our focus upward, the more we're concentrating, then what happens then? When we're washing dishes, what are we doing? We're concentrating. When we're driving to work, well, we're focusing on the road, but other things too. That concentration deepens. This practice of Hong Sa, very, very powerful. What's our next technique we come to? The technique of Om. God's cosmic vibration in all of creation. Okay, all of creation is God. Okay, we're not this body we see. We're energy. We're Om. This book is wonderful, and it really focuses on Om. Highly recommended. It's a little book. There's another wonderful quote on Om I want to read. Yogananda calls it, "O holy Om." O holy vibration, boom on the shores of my consciousness, reverberate through my body, mind, and soul, surroundings, cities, the earth, the planets, the universe, and every particle of creation. Unite my consciousness with the cosmic consciousness. That's what we're doing in Om. We're uniting my consciousness with the bigger consciousness. What happens? We learn to listen, right? What happens when we listen? We hear things, don't we? Yeah. What is it? I love that commercial for those who are old enough to know when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Remember that? Just learn to listen. We learn to tune in. What is God saying to us in all of his creation? What is he saying to us in the person I'm working with today? What is he saying to me in my family? What is he saying to me through nature? Om, the holy vibration, holy vibration. And then we come, of course, to the practice of Kriya, the airplane route to God. Not the train route, the airplane route. Okay, I always think, what are those fancy planes that go from Paris to New York very fast? Concorde. I think of the Concorde. Okay, buckle up, we're going for it. But you can see how they all work together, and then each one gives its own benefit. It gives its own spiritual attribute. Kriya Yoga takes all the paths of yoga. Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, takes karma yoga, the yoga of action, takes jnana yoga, the yoga of that deep wisdom, unites them all together. And then, so we have those 4 techniques, but Yogananda said another thing. He said those 4 techniques plus what will bring you to God? Devotion. Plus devotion. Why? Why is devotion so important? Do we come to the path? Do we have, does it help if our heart is closed? No? What do we do in yoga when we do Hatha Yoga? We roll the shoulders back, opening the heart chakra, okay? Every single technique has Yogananda's vibration in it, has Yogananda's love in it. The energization is a very devotional exercise. When you do them, they're not mechanical, okay? You do them consciously, deliberately, with Yogananda in mind. That was his unique contribution to science. When we do Hong Sa concentration, we do it with devotion, right? Om, when we're listening, okay? We listen, how? With our open hearts. Sri Yukteswar said it's not possible when you first come to the spiritual path to put one foot in the front of the other without the natural love of the heart. But he reminds us we all have this natural love of the heart. But we forget. Things happen to us. Or you grow up in New York City and you just grow up like this. And your heart is not open. And my heart was there, but it was buried. I had to peel away the layers. Just like a brick of gold, no matter how deep you bury it, it's still a brick of gold, right? It can be buried in the sand or the dirt. It's still a brick. Our heart, we all have that natural love of the heart. That's what the masters remind us. Yogananda, again, that same group, the group of women that were here the other day at Laurawood, they pointed to Yogananda and they said, one lady said, there's so much love in that, in his face, and he just exudes it. We all have that love. So those 4 techniques plus devotion will bring us to God. Yogananda said the time for knowing God has come. The time has come. What are we waiting for? I talked a little bit last Sunday about this, we waiting to get that right job, to get the right house, to get all those things in place. And again, there's nothing wrong with all those things. But if that's all we're seeking, those things never last. They never last. But what lasts are your practices, your connection with Spirit. What happens when we do our practices, when we offer our practices? We don't have to worry how well we're doing them. It doesn't mean we can be sloppy. But when we offer our practices up with love and devotion, Yogananda, I'm here today. Okay, I've had a hard day. Okay, this is the best I can give you. All I can do is sit here, but I'm here. Okay, the rest, you help me. Okay, you show up. And he will show up. He's promised us the spiritual path is 25% of our effort, right? But we have to show up. We have to do 100% of our 25%, okay? We have to show up. But then he reminds us 25% is the Guru's grace, right? And then what's the other half?
50% is
God's grace. I mean, where do you get these odds on any football team or whatever season we're in now? Really, on what path? We've been promised this, even a little practice. And Krishna reminds us, even if you offer a leaf, a fruit, a flower, meaning anything, whatever you offer, if it comes from you, from who you are, with your love, with your devotion, I will accept it with great joy because it comes from you. It comes from you, and it's going to look just like you and you. It's going to look different for each one of us. One of the things we learn is we don't compare. Don't compare when we do our hatha yoga, when we do our meditation. We don't compare because it's my path. This is what it looks like for me. As funny as it looks, as quirky as it looks, or whatever, That's the beautiful thing about being in community. We support each other right where we are. And we remind each other. Satsang, so important. Satsang. So I don't know if I have much more to share. It's a privilege to be here together. If you come as much as you can to this whole weekend. That's why we do this once a year, to reinvigorate our practice. And we do it together. It's so much more fun to do it together, isn't it? It's a lot of fun. So anyway, thank you all for coming tonight, and blessings to each and every one of you on your path to self-realization.
This is the first time that we've offered a Kriya ceremony and a Kriya weekend without a guest Kriyacharya. And it's a step forward in our lives in terms of carrying this remarkable gift from God and from the Masters into this world. We chose the topic tonight. living in harmony with Kriya Yoga, very deliberately, because it's one of the primary issues, one of the primary needs on the planet today is for harmony and integrated living, sustainability, a way to be in every moment connected to the great flow of life. And everywhere people are thrashing around, everywhere you see people, even on the path, even people who are aspiring to do good things, kind of folding up under the stress of the kinds of things that are happening on the planet today. Everybody, the number of people that we serve, and the number of people who come here to the temple, number of people who are trying in Portland. I love Portland, because Portland tries harder than any place I've ever been to get it right. They just really try. Everybody's trying to do all the right stuff throughout the entire city. Everybody's got chickens in their backyards, and they've got little cob outfits out front, and there's just this endless stream of goodness trying to be born into meaning. And the places, I was in Southeast not long ago, 6 months or a year ago. And it was strange because it was clearly filled with people who are doing everything they possibly could to do things differently. And not just because they wanted to be, it wasn't egoic. It wasn't like they were doing it differently so they could be different, but they were trying to find answers and solutions to the needs of our planet and our time. And they were just giving everything they had to it. And so many of them I walked by, and there was just this look of kind of in the back of their eyes, like, is this really as good as it gets? I mean, I'm doing it all. I'm doing permaculture. I've got my little garden out front. I'm drinking the right coffee. And I'm not eating gluten, for God's sake, all things. I'm vegan. And it somehow isn't enough. It somehow isn't even close to enough. I read a quote the other day, and forgive me, Anna, this is not something I would normally present in front of you, but I think it's relevant to the conversation. Dante, in his Divine Comedy, he said, the deepest levels of hell are reserved for those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis. The deepest realms of hell are reserved for those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis. We are in a time of profound moral crisis on this planet. And there is a call to action every single place you turn. But we're in a low age. We're in an age of, just coming out of the lowest age, an age of materialism. I actually had a teacher when I was young who told the class, she said, it was a he actually, he said, I just remember the quote so vividly. He said, if you can't smell it, hear it, taste it, touch it, or feel it, it doesn't exist. Think about that. That was, that wasn't in the last yuga. That was still, it was 40 years ago. It was recent. And we have an entire planet that's operating still largely upon that principle. I'm separate, I'm different. The physical reality is what's real. And the second we go down that road, the second anxiety shows up, the second stress shows up, the second concern shows up, what's the natural response? If you are separate from others and from this world. React? Absolutely. No, absolutely. What else? Contraction, and there's something else that shows up. I'm going to get mine for myself and protect myself. It's the greed, it's the selfishness, it's the drive that's driving this planet into the points of despair that are out there. One of the most remarkable things to contemplate is we do not have a lack of food on this planet. Starvation is not caused by the lack of capacity to produce food on this planet. Starvation is caused by greed, selfishness, and lack of willingness to share and distribute. It's caused by putting money into arms instead of into caring for others, into protecting and defending and identifying and isolating. Great masters come at troubled times. Great masters come at troubled times because that's when they feel people yearning for alternatives, yearning for answers, yearning genuinely with their hearts to try and find new ways to be that are more fulfilling, more in harmony with how this world is created. Christ came in the darkest of times. We're going to go to Israel very soon. This is I'm going to bookmark here, and now a word from our sponsor. Okay, we're going to go to Israel soon, and there's been a lot of fluff about, well, aren't you concerned about what's going to happen and what's happening there? Of course we are. But the places that need light the most are the places that are having the hardest time. And a part of a yogi's job, a part of somebody who loves God's job, is to take that light into the hardest places and to hold it there where it's least obvious and least available. So yes, we're very concerned, but that doesn't stop us from going if we feel God's impulse to go. We would love to take you all with. We wish we could. We would love to take you in pictures or sacred items or anything. We'll take them to all the sacred places. So if you have them, we've got 1 week left before we go. So if you have things you want to get to us that way, please do get them to us. And any prayers that you want, anybody you're praying for that you want us to carry to those shrines, there is power. Travel is a fool's paradise. We go, we haul our bodies here, there, and everywhere, hoping that we're going to change somehow. And it just keeps us busy. But there are power spots on this planet, and when you get outside of your habit of mind and habit of self-perception, in power spots where God has walked the earth and been awake, changes really happen. So pilgrimage is a real thing. And we go with that in mind on behalf of everybody here, everybody we're connected to. Going back, the Yogananda spoke a lot about the concept of hell. So now you can pick me back up again, Anna, because now we go the different direction. When you're young, it's very easy. Erica's 30, and she's extremely young, but I've watched her through her growing up. I've watched other young people through their growing up. And it's easy to feel despair in the face of all the things that are needed and the kind of life that we're inheriting when we're young. When we're older, we just, we're heading for the barn. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This world, bah. But when you're young, you're committed to it. You're born to it, and your job is you're born to the time that you're in. But it can feel so incredibly overwhelming. And the masters come into those times when there's such a tremendous need, and there's such a tremendous yearning for something else to be born. And they come and they stand there and they say, guess what? We have an answer. Christ stood in the midst of the greatest brutality that mankind can know, inflicted by not only the Romans, who were just absolutely brutal in their domination of other cultures, but also the religious domination that was there. You have to remember, it wasn't the Romans that put Christ to the cross. It was the religious elders, because what he was offering flew in the face of their self-protectiveness and their control. But what did he say was the answer for the things of their time? Love thy neighbor as thyself. Judge not, lest ye be judged. He gave the antidote to the problems of the time. And of course, they didn't very easily receive it, and so they stuck him up on a cross. It was more convenient to get rid of him than to try and adopt it. We're in the same kind of thing. There are deep and profound needs in our time. And every one of us, every single one of us is facing the pressure of that every day, all day long. And we become inert, we become passive, we become unable to move if we don't know how to respond. If we don't have tools that give us power to make a real difference. It's not enough to pick up the Dixie cup. It's not enough to stop littering. Stopping littering is good, but it's not enough. Clearly, it's not enough. What did Yogananda say was the antidote to the problems of our time? Love. Yes, but self-realization. The time for knowing God has come. You could have said that back when Jesus was walking the planet, and everybody would have kind of gone like this, huh? How do you do that? What does that mean? Well, they did. Who do you think you are? He said, even your own scriptures say ye are gods. And it was part of the blasphemy that they strung him up for. But Yogananda said, it's a new age. The time for knowing God has come. He didn't just give a prescription. He showed you how to fill it. He showed us how we can take that prescription and apply it and what we can expect from it. I was radical. I was very politically involved growing up because I didn't have other resources for the energy. I want to bookmark for just a second. If you were facing Mount Everest right now and you knew you had to climb to the top to save yourself, how would you feel? Right now, you got to climb to the top of Mount Everest from right where you are, or oh despair, things are going to fall apart. It's all going to come to pieces. How would you feel? Overwhelmed, right? Yeah. Now, if you already had the capacity to climb Mount Everest, if you had the what? Energy at your disposal, if you developed the power to just run up to the top of Mount Everest, and there are people, women and men, who are doing unbelievable things. You know, it took 4 days to climb to the top of the Eiger. It's a mountain in the Swiss Alps. It took 4 days, and I think a couple people died in the process. The first time was actually summited. Some guy just did it in about 4 hours. He ran up it, literally. He just, think about if we opened ourselves to the flow of energy to where climbing Mount Everest was just something you did, how would you feel about it? Well, okay, no big thing. So many of the challenges in front of us are determined by the lack of energy that we feel or associate with. Yogananda said, do energization, learn control of energy, open the energy doors, master yourself. Use these techniques so that life doesn't overwhelm you. Then he gave us the power to concentrate that energy. As Gangamata talked about in Hong Sa, the power to put it wherever we want with laser focus. And then he said, meditation. Meditation is the answer. Finding God is the answer in this age. Meditation is the capacity to focus single-pointedly on God or some aspect of God. So Om. Focus on all of God. Focus on the vibration that permeates all of creation with all of your energy focused. And it's no longer overwhelming because you've got it there. Om is the highest practice that we can do. And to meditate on Om with focus and energy and concentration is the culmination of all yoga. Kriya Yoga isn't the culmination of yoga. Kriya Yoga is the last thing he taught because you already have to have these things in play before it'll work. But Kriya Yoga is what takes away those things that keep us from merging in Om. It's the ultimate tool because it goes in. We have billions and billions and billions of tendencies inside that distract us, that cause a deflection of that single-pointed concentration. And Kriya goes in there and unlocks all that energy, unlocks all that diversion, and gives it back to us in single-pointed focus. That's the power of Kriya. In Kriya, in Hong Sa, we're communing with God. In Hong Sa, we're communing with Spirit. You feel the peace and the power of Spirit. When we energize, we are filling ourselves with the energy of Spirit. When we do Om, we're merging with creation. And when we do Kriya, we're eliminating the distractions. We're erasing all those. I don't think many of the current experiences of life on this planet at this time are necessarily the pinnacle of how God would have us experience life or have life be experienced. Now, I will say this. It is exactly what's happening. I was standing beside a friend 30 years ago. He was a very wise soul back then and continues. He runs our Bangalore Center in India now, he and his wife. I was standing beside him, and I was just in kind of one of those funks, and I was new on the path, and I said to him, gosh, if God had his way, and I was going to say, none of this would be happening, right? And he just stopped me, and he looked at me and says, whose way do you think this is? What we've got is God's way. This is it. The things we have to cure are our particular challenges. The things in front of us in our generation were the things that we had to meet and overcome to become who become one with God, to become who we were meant to be, who we were born to be. The same thing is true of your generation, Anna. There's a remarkable opportunity, and the kind of souls that are being born into this generation are extraordinary. And the match is, believe it or not, perfect. But every single person in it has a choice. The choice we have every single day for each one of us, and the choice I would say that's even more relevant for your generation, is, Swami once said there are two kinds of people. Master said it too. There's two kinds of people. Anybody want to guess? Anybody remember what this quote is? Yeah, those that are seeking God and those that are going away from God. There's only two choices we all have every single day and every single moment. Is to turn toward the light or turn away. And it determines everything. Anna, you will never become a 6'2" or 7'2" black basketball player this life. You just won't. That's not a choice you have. There's many other things you also won't choose. You won't become your mother either, which is great news for you and for her. There are many things you won't become. The power for each one of us in each moment is do we turn in this moment of stress, in this moment of trial, in this moment of opportunity and challenge, do we turn toward the light? Do we turn toward God? Do we get more immersed in it, or do we turn away? It's really the question. It's the germane question on this planet at this time. And Kriya Yoga is the gift they've given us to help us to answer that question. It's the universal, it's the Kriya Yoga, straight from the autobiography of a yogi. Kriya Yoga is the greatest technique for salvation by self-effort ever given to mankind. I put the other two evers in there. But other than that, that's the quote. It's the greatest technique for salvation by self-effort, for us to merge with God. What happens when we merge with God? What happens when we reach toward God? What happens to our awareness? What happens to our magnetism? What happens to our power? What happens to our influence? It all expands. It all expands. One of the metaphors that we use on the path is the metaphor when we're trying to see something. And we can't see the forest for the trees. We can't see the scope of what's going on because we're so lost in the woods. And what's the first thing you do if you're out backpacking? If you want to see the lay of the land, what do? You put energy into going up the mountain to getting to the high point so that you can see how things lay out. That's what being in tune with Spirit does. That's what happens when we do our practices. We start to see the picture. We start to be able to understand where to go and how to get there. As long as you're buried in the trees, as long as you haven't put out the energy to get outside of it, nothing's going to happen. I remember, again, a quote from the autobiography of a yogi. This is from Lahiri Mahashaya. So, of course, the path is, Christ said, it's time to bring the sacred teachings that have been held by the East during the Dark Ages back to the West. We can handle it now. The people on earth can handle it now. It's time to re-merge. And Babaji said, great, got you covered, right? Just those words. And so he pulls strings in the ether, and Lahiri Mahashaya, who's playing the role of just an accountant for the Bengal Nagpur Railway, I think it was, ends up being called up into the foothills of the Himalaya, and there's no work for him. So he spends his days wandering through the mountains and gets lost one day, of course, and stumbles across who? But Babaji. Babaji awakens him, says, you need to purify. He goes down to the river, he lays there, comes back, memory all comes back, and he gets reinitiated into Kriya Yoga. He remembers. And he spends this blissful short period of time just lost in the presence of God with his guru. And then what does his guru say to him? What does Babaji say? You don't get to stay here. You don't get to hang out where it's so nice. Your job is to bring this back to the world. Your job is to bring Kriya Yoga back to mankind so that those who are willing to dedicate their lives to the practice can find God. Oh, but what about the householders who can't? Okay, so a special blessing came through him that allows us, mere mortals, to have access to these great and sacred teachings. And then, of course, he dispenses it from his little room, but he reaches across and finds truth seekers and serves some of the greatest souls on the planet and awakens in them that same yearning. And of course, Sri Yukteswar becomes one of his disciples. And Sri Yukteswar then carries that torch for Yogananda. It's said that the Sri Yukteswar came, and he was very stern, he was very austere. And Master asked him, he said, why have you been so austere? Why don't you have more disciples? You're one of the greatest souls on the planet. Or I guess Swami asked Master, and the answer was, because he was just there to wrap up his responsibility to the last few disciples that he had on this plane. He wasn't looking for a lot of disciples. He was there to awaken Yogananda, to give Yogananda, pass the baton to Yogananda. So Yogananda would come to the West and bring the sacred teaching, the secret teaching of Kriya Yoga, these 4 practices plus devotion. They are the response to the heart call of us to have meaning in our lives, to live in harmony with life, that which created this world, that which created everything. It knows what's trying to happen. And the second we get in tune, the second we shut our mouths, still our minds, quiet our breath, and go deep inside and remove the blocks to merging that Kriya does, we get in tune with the flow of harmony, the flow of life, the flow of power. It's not enough to have Kriya as a technique. We have to practice it. And it works by regular practice. It works by daily offering. I remember the first time I had moved to Ananda. I was a Kriyaban already. I was fairly new. And I was a little rough around the edges. Excuse me, I was a little rougher around the edges. And I was in the middle of a painful divorce and working a job I detested and just a million things. And I'd become kind of an equal opportunity offender. I had just managed to become just really unbearable. And everywhere I looked, there were little messes. There were little fires smoldering. In all the relationships, Erica was mad at me at that point. She was a little 3-year-old. She was mad at me. Her mother was certainly mad at me. My employer, my bank account was mad at me because there wasn't enough money. And I was just every single thing. Everywhere I looked, there was just this disaster. And I finally just couldn't take it anymore. And I thought, the hell with it. And I grabbed I made a little reservation, and I grabbed my stuff right after doing building all day on Friday. I went home and I grabbed all my stuff, my meditation gear, and I drove up to the meditation retreat. And I walked in and I lit the candle on the altar. It was just a little cabin. It was really rugged. And I lit the candle on the altar, and I put my meditation stuff down and put the rest of the stuff away. And I had a little bottle of juice and a little bottle of water. And I sat down, and I just looked at the altar, and I just went. And then I went outside, and I energized, and I came back in, and I sat down. And I just started meditating. I did Hang Sa for a while. I had a little Om board. Did Hang Sa for a while. I did Om, then I did Kriya. And about an hour into it, I just fell over. I just literally just boom. And so there was nothing left. I mean, I was running on pure, willingness and willpower. And after about an hour, I kind of woke up and I sat back up. Candle was still burning. I just sat back up and I did honks off for a little bit. Got up, went out and energized. Came back in, sat down. I did another round of Kriyas. I sat there for about another 20 minutes after that. And bonk, I fell over again. Friday night, all night. Saturday, all day. Saturday night, all night. I just never left the altar. I just slept there. I just spent my day and my night and my day. I did the best I could. I sipped my little water, my juice, did Om when I could, slept when I had to, did whatever I could. I came out Sunday morning about 10 o'clock in the morning. I started packing up, got down to the village. Must have been about 1 o'clock. And I know the timing because Sunday service was over, and it ends about 12:30, and I was trying to sneak in to the mail room, get my mail, and go back up to where I lived without seeing anybody because, I'd left a mess everywhere. And the very first thing that happened was I walked out of the mail room, and one of the people who I had the hardest time with was coming up, and I went, oh, God. And they walked up and said, oh, it is so nice to see you. He gave me the warmest hug. And I went, okay. And I you too, it's very nice. And I went on, and it happened with every single thing. Erica called that night. I mean, just every single thing, it cleaned up. My bank account had even cleaned up in the 2 days. I swear to God, I don't know where the money came from, but I was no longer overdrafting. We're told that the answer to everything is in communion with Spirit. Seek God first, and everything else comes. The path of Kriya Yoga and the practice of Kriya Yoga is the greatest gift into the lives of each one of us. And we should be I know I'm speaking to the choir, but I also know I'm speaking to people who struggle with their Kriyas, who struggle with their practice, who struggle with their priorities. It's a demanding time, and it's not always obvious how to choose. And the amount of distraction that's there, the amount of need for being busy, the amount of need for outer work, the need to do things is true. But the most important thing we can do is our Kriya Yoga practice. If we don't have it, get it. Let me borrow the book. Yeah, thank you, I got it. This is from the chapter on Kriya Yoga. The Kriya Yogi mentally directs his life energy to revolve upward and downward around the 6 spinal centers, which correspond to the 12 astral signs of the zodiac, the symbolic cosmic man. 1/2 minute of revolution of an energy around the sensitive spinal cord of man affects subtle progress in his evolution. That 1/2 minute of Kriya equals 1 year of natural spiritual unfoldment. That 30 seconds equals an entire year of natural spiritual unfoldment. 30 seconds equals 1 year of natural spiritual unfoldment. They say if you want to get a point through, you say it 3 times. I'd like to say it 30 times. 30 seconds, 1/2 minute of practice of Kriya gives you, think about the anxiety of this year. Think about the times you've been close to God and you felt absolutely empowered and the capacity to conquer the world, to do anything, that it could come through you. And think about all the times you've been in despair because of your body, because of the environment, because of the work environment, because of the struggles of raising a child or being with, or being raised by a parent. It fits. It's one size fits all. This is one size fits all, one answer for every single issue. Solve all your problems through Kriya Yoga. Because in God there are no problems. All there is the show. And the show always, always, always ends in 0. But that 0 is filled with every single thing we want. It's essential that you don't look to what somebody else is doing as the guide for what you should be doing. Don't ask, is so-and-so behaving the way I want? If they are, then I'll do what I'm supposed to do. Don't ask what other people are doing. Don't ask if they're showing up for meditation. We have not only the gift of Kriya Yoga in this path, but we have one other gift, and that's the gift of satsang, the gift of supportive friendship, the gift of coming together collectively, lending our energy and our strength to our own practices, and that strength blessing and uplifting and inspiring those around us. It doesn't matter your physical condition. I'm talking because I see people who struggle, some obviously, some not obviously, with physical conditions. Kriya is not dependent upon your physical condition. It's not dependent upon your age. It's not dependent upon any single thing except your willingness to learn it, your willingness to point towards self-mastery, and your willingness to practice on a daily basis. There is no other criterion. And every single condition that we have, every single condition, age included, which seems so damn inevitable, even that has no power to influence who we are if we live in the presence of God. If we live in that energy, in that consciousness, in that freedom, it's just entertainment. But if we don't, Yogananda said, those who do not know how to live in this world is a terrible machine that will tear you limb from limb. And that's the experience we have. Hell isn't someplace else. Hell is our own experience inside. The lowest realms of hell are reserved for those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis, not because there's some place you go, but because your own soul, the call to respond, the call to be involved in life is so profound. And when we see that moral compass that we're born with, everyone is born with, when we see need and we don't respond, our own nature folds up on itself, contracts upon itself, implodes. There's not a one of us who can save this world by our outer actions. And in fact, there's not a one of us that can even probably make much of a difference in this world by our outer actions. Try however hard we will. I remember Master gave me Song of the Rose Cafe to run 20 years ago. And I ran it, and we moved it. I ran it successfully, as much as you could in the little first place it was in, and we moved it. And I was so certain we were going to have an overnight success and just save the world through veggie juice. And everybody was going to come flocking to our door. And as soon as we opened the door, it was a great fanfare. Dave Monette and the world-class trumpet maker and all these great things trumpeted our entrance into the world, the new Song of the Rose. And the day we opened, it was fabulous, and we started to progressively lose $1,000 to $1,500 a month from the day we opened. And I was working about 50 hours a week, and I thought, well, heck, I'll just work harder. So I worked 60 hours a week, and we lost $1,600 a month. Well, I'll work 70 hours a week, I just kept upping the ante. And the harder I tried, the more I lost. It was a very, very important lesson in attunement, in receptivity, in learning how to really respond to the needs of this world. I knew that it was the answer was in putting out more energy, but you have to not only put out more energy, you have to put out the right energy. You have to do things in the way that brings harmony. It's not just making noise and being busy. Kriya Yoga teaches us that if we go into God, then every action we make is in tune with the harmony of creation. Every gesture, every thought, every breath we breathe is filled with that. And that spreads. That's a contagion that infects others and breaks down barriers and relaxes the tension of the heart and decreases the need and selfishness and contractiveness that's the plague of this time. Living in the presence of God. Not beautiful little things on Facebook talking about the presence of God, but profoundly living in the presence of God through the practice of Kriya Yoga. It's the thing that can save this world. It's the thing that can save each one of us. And by salvation, I'm talking about giving us the power to overcome the challenges that inevitably happen in this world. No matter what your job description, no matter the role you play, every one of us is going to be tested with feeling overwhelmed, feeling inadequate, feeling lost, feeling... Those are the measures of how far away from God you are. You can reclaim it in a moment. You can reclaim it through the practice of Kriya Yoga in a heartbeat. One weekend can clean up the mess of who knows how long. Just doing it and supporting each other. Let's use this weekend. Let's use this remarkable weekend as an opportunity to recalibrate the star that we navigate by. Each one of us together. Let's take that yearning that we all have to have meaning in our lives and take it away from all the superficial things that we think limit us from having that meaning. So-and-so isn't behaving right, or I can't do that, or they're doing this, or Monsanto and GMOs, or it's gluten that's got me. Let's take it away from these things and realize that the one common problem we all have is the need to commune with Spirit. Recreation, vacations, amusements, they're not going to solve it. They're just other places energy bleeds out. It's in the direct application of consciousness to Hong Sa, energization, Om, and Kriya that everything we're seeking can be found. And we can either respond to the masters the best we can. We'll betray them just like Peter did Christ. We'll blow it. We'll not get over the bar many times. But Master said, I don't care your faults. I don't mind your faults. I mind your indifference. God minds your indifference. It's the making somebody else or something else the problem instead of the lack of personal spiritual connection the problem, and then doing something about that. That's the cure. Christ had 12 disciples, and they changed the planet. How many people are in here? We could change the planet if we're willing to put our minds and our hearts into a single place together. And not preach at others, not talk at others and tell them how they should be different, but us becoming different ourselves through the practice of Kriya Yoga. I invite all those who have Kriya, re-energize your practice this weekend. Make it what you do. No matter what else you do, you are a Kriya bond from the time you take that vow, from the time you take that oath. That's what you do. That's what we do. We do Kriya. We do Kriya in the morning. We do Kriya at night. We do Kriya at noon sometimes. We have troubles. We have a bad moment. We do Kriya. That's what we do. Those that haven't got it, think about that. Think about, wouldn't it be nice, 30 seconds to erase an entire year of time for spiritual growth, for communing with God? It's a pretty good formula. It works pretty well. But you have to prepare yourself. Nobody here is going to stand up and run up the side of Mount Everest today. We haven't trained. Nobody here who hasn't trained for Kriya is going to be able to do Kriya effectively. It's not some little emblem you stick on your sleeve or on your coat. It's the power you develop inside that allows it, just like it's the power you develop in your muscles, your tissues, your lungs, your will, that allows you to get Mount Everest. And this is a bigger mountain. It's the exercise you do in Hong Sa, energization, Om, and Kriya on a daily basis that gives that power to practice Kriya effectively. It's the greatest treasure we have, being together tonight. It's the greatest gift that the Masters can give us. And it's not just us 25. It's us 25 and those 5. And I think Gandhi said it once. He said, if you know the truth and you're alone, you're still in the majority because the truth is still the truth. This is still the truth. Doesn't matter who else turns toward it. There's 2 million people in Portland tonight. All of them were invited tonight. You showed up. Go on alone. This is our privilege. This is our gift. And every time we practice Kriya, there's a great joy that awakens inside of us. The presence of God right there. And it illuminates this world, illuminates our lives and the lives of others. So let's let's take this on. Those who don't have it, let's build toward it. Let's make it slow speed, Yogananda used to say. Let's go as fast as we can without getting spiritual indigestion. But let's remember what the goal is. The goal is it's the time for knowing God has come. Let's go there together. I'll step off my soapbox and just see if there's any questions or any thoughts or anything people would like to talk about Kriya that we can talk about without being in an initiation. Are there any questions or thoughts or anything? Okay. What would be the attitude? Well, yes. Sure. He said, what would be the attitude that one should practice Kriya in or with? Did I get that right? Well, if we're really doing it, it's with awe and reverence and devotion and deep humility, very deep humility, real profound self-offering, just complete openness of heart and mind. And so when we're really practicing Kriya, these things come also naturally, because the deeper you go in Kriya, the more you find yourself in the presence of the infinite. And it's pretty hard to be arrogant in the face of that. There's a great moment in the Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna is talking with Krishna. And they're having this wonderful dialogue back and forth, and Krishna keeps illuminating Arjuna's consciousness. And at one point he says, "Oh, great scorcher of foes," I think that's the epithet he uses. He says, "Because you have not the carping spirit, I now reveal to you truth divine." And then he drops his mortal form, and he opens himself as the infinite Lord. And Arjuna's sitting there going, a little little deer in the headlights kind of thing. And this goes on for a little bit. And then Arjuna says, would you mind resuming your other visage? I'm a little disconcerted by this infinite. I don't know how to work with this, basically, is what he's saying. It's so incredibly overwhelming what there is to readopt, reclaim as our own reality. And that's all that Krishna was showing, is this is who you are. This is who we all are. This is what's real. And Arjuna just goes, okay, but it's a lot, okay? Let me take the next step. And that's okay. And then he becomes familiar again. It becomes very familiar and very intimate. An attitude surrounding what we just said about the practice of Kriya is the most profound thing we can do, is have an attitude of friendship. Real friendship. Deep respect, profound listening, trusting the good intentions of the others around us who are in the Sangha, who are also seeking truth. The highest level of relationship that's possible is the relationship of friendship. It's the relationship that God holds for us. It's the relationship that the masters hold for us. And not overly familiar and dismissive and I can say anything I want, but really deep, profound respect, but not guarded. And a trust that there is goodwill underlying every single thing that happens. So that's also how we hold ourselves in the practice of Kriya Yoga.
And I would add, with joy.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about, in our class, we were talking a lot about how Yogananda would say, be a smile millionaire. We talk about smiling, but with joy. Because, I sometimes picture Yogananda smiling at me when I do the energization, or Hangsa, or Om, or Kriya. He must be so happy. She's finally doing it.
Even a little practice of this inward
religion
for all of us.
But remembering that joy, because even with the energization, it can feel so technical, right? All of this. But remembering that flow of energy, doing it with, we talked about the willingness before. I am doing this practice for you. with that awe, with that gratitude. But for me, I try to remember the joy. I get too serious sometimes with all of these.
You have no idea.
I'm going to do this now. Anyway, another thought.
That's very sweet. Anything else that people would like to talk about Kriya? Questions about it as a way of life, as opposed to just a practice?
Anita.
How often do you offer how often do you offer Kriya training during the year?
It starts, good question, it starts with Hong Sa and the introduction to Hong Sa. Then in Raja Yoga, we teach energization exercises. We've been doing it twice a year, habitually, but we just we've started doing week-long intensives at Laurelwood. And when that's appropriate, and so I'm speaking to the large group, I'm not speaking to just you, I'm speaking to everybody. When that's appropriate, and there's enough interest, we'll offer that anytime. And, so you could offer it conceivably 52 times a year. It's whenever there's enough interest in it. And then we offer through the temple a 14-week or 14-session thing. And really, the art and science of Raja Yoga is the second step of preparing for Kriya Yoga, because it works with energization exercises very deeply every time. And it refines Hong Sa, it gives us an established practice, and it helps us. None of us can get to God by the mind, but if the mind isn't engaged, the rest of us won't come along. So it gets the mind engaged in understanding how it really works so that we can cooperate with the path. So anyway, we do that at least twice a year. And we'll do it again in the spring. But again, if there's enough energy, we'll do it anytime. If there's really enough demand and enough energy, we'll do it anytime, but twice a year. And then we do exploring discipleship, because that's the next step, is taking discipleship. And those who feel ready, then they can take discipleship initiation or vow, which we'll do this Sunday. We have 4 new disciples. That's very, very rich. And then at that time, you can get the Om technique. You can get the third technique. It takes about 4 to 6 months of twice a day practicing to the best of our ability those techniques, and then you can get Kriya initiation. We do Kriya at least once a year around this time. When there is real interest, and there may be again enough momentum to do another Kriya initiation in the springtime. There may be a handful of people who are ready at that point. And if so, we're going to go ahead and start to offer Kriya now that we have a Kriya Charya here. We're going to start offering Kriya as often as we can get people ready. Our job is to make it possible for people to step into the practice of Kriya and it to become a daily part of life. And if we could do it, we would love to get everybody in Portland practicing Kriya, from the mayor down through the street sweepers and all of us, bookending all the way through it. So, yeah, so anyway, I hope that helps. It starts in February, is that right? The 14
I'm
class?
sure it does,
Yeah.
yes.
So you could do that, and
Yeah.
every time you do Hong Sa, every time you energize, every time you do Om, you're doing part of Kriya. Because when you have Kriya, you still do those other 3. So do Hong Sa deeply. These things are so important. Yogananda said, if you want to find God, do Hong Sa 4 hours a day. Okay? So if you don't have any other technique, do Hong Sa every free moment you have. Just revert your mind back to Hong Sa. Make that be your default program. If you have Hong Sa and energization, if you're not doing Hong Sa and you're not doing anything else, energize. You can do little pieces of it. And for everybody, age, body type, attitude, no matter what it is, energization will make a difference. I guarantee it. And there was a friend of ours who, she was fighting depression. She had an appointment with one of the monks down at Self-Realization Fellowship. And his name was Brother Turiyananda. And Turiyananda was, I met him one time after a Sunday service he gave down there. And we're standing in line and we're walking down along and he's just doing this. He's just looking up and pranaming and to the next person. And I was so hungry. And so I kind of went, I stood there in front of him and he looked up and he kind of did this and he looked back up again and there was so much power in his eyes, it almost knocked me over. And he told her, he said, when I came to the path, he said, I suffered from depression. He said, and I used energization to overcome it. He said, I energize 10 times a day. You do it twice. But you could see, you could literally see the power flowing out of his being, feel it, from the very power of doing. So do energization. Yogananda said if he was on a desert island and only had one practice, it would be energization, because through it everything else would be revealed.
The other thing I would add, part of what's our joy, we get to share Raja Yoga when we do, but every time we do, I personally go deeper in my practice. I learn something new, many times, especially with this last group. They were great. But no,
we learned a lot from them.
You take it deeper. And so I would also just put out, even though you may know Hong Sa, or maybe you've taken the meditation for starters or whatever, take it again. Take it again. Take the 4-week here or at Laurelwood or wherever. Take the meditation. You just keep, you hear new things, and you just take it deeper. So take it again, and then if you've taken Raja Yoga, take it again in February. Do the 14 class, do the week-long. They're all different. They all give you a different experience. There's every time you get a new nugget, something new, you go, aha, because you're ready to hear it.
Sometimes you get a whole plateful.
Sometimes you get a whole plateful, yeah. So really, yeah, they're so deep, just.
Yeah, it's important to do well what you've been given with real gratitude. There's a sweet story in the autobiography of the postman. One guy is bugging Lahiri Mahashaya to give him second or third kriyas, the higher kriyas. And the guy wasn't ready. It wasn't time. And the little postman comes in, and so Lahiri Mahashaya says to him, so, do you want to take higher kriyas? And the little postman looks up and he says, oh no, master. Oh no, I am so filled with joy from the practice I already have from the first kriya, I couldn't possibly do more. No. He goes, no. Do what we have with great joy, with great enthusiasm. Let it carry you to God, and then the next step will naturally be there. Don't make this a mountain climbing episode in terms of, or a corporate exercise in gaining prestige and power. Oh boy, now I've got the next little thing on my chest. Make it about going deeper and deeper into the practices till they reveal God to you. And live in that, and the next step will naturally come. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's 8:30. We can go on if anybody has anything more, but if not, we can just take a moment of silence and feel for the presence of God together.